Yeah, good morning and good evening. Thank you for joining us today for the CMC Drug Development webinar. I'm Ramya T. Karu, Project Associate at Indo US Rare. And behalf of the team Indo US Rare, I would like to give a warm welcome to each one of you. Next slide. Here is a look at today's agenda. Next slide, Soundarya. We'll begin with a brief overview of Indo US Rare, our vision, and our programs. For those joining us for the first time, we'll then move on to our meeting event of the day, a presentation by Dr. Partha Mukherjee, followed by a conversation and discussion with Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, our founder and executive chair, and end with Q&A session. Next slide. Before we get started, a few housekeeping points for us to note down. Please type in your questions in the chat window, and please feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function. Next slide. We are the Indo US Organization for Rare Diseases. We are a non-profit 501c3 charity based out of Virginia, USA, working to combat rare diseases by fostering cross-border research, collaborations, data sharing, and clinical trials. Globally, our mission is to empower rare lives by bridging nations. Indo US Rare was founded with a vision to address the significant gaps in global diversity, equity, and access to clinical trials for rare diseases. Our mission at Indo US Rare includes connecting all rare disease patients in India, US, and globally, collaborating for rare disease development and implementation between the US, India, and other countries, organizing international conferences throughout the world, and bringing together different stakeholders in the rare disease community. We also facilitate cross-border research and advocate for rare disease patients. Next slide. This is a brief glimpse of our diverse team, passionate and dedicated individuals who are using their wealth of experience to help the cause of rare diseases. Next slide. These are our board members, advisory board members, management team, and consultants, and all our volunteers and supporters who work tirelessly for the Indo US Rare mission. Next slide. Under this mission, we currently run 6 patient-centric programs, that is Patient Concierge, Patient Alliance, Research Program, Educational and Awareness, Advocacy Programs, and Corporate Alliance. Next slide, please. Our tech-enabled Patient Concierge is a scalable platform for information assistance to patients and caregivers who reach out to us through a simple online form available in over 100 languages. Currently, we have received 100 plus patient requests from all over the world, and we have been successful in catering to 15 countries around the world, like India, US, Canada, Australia, and countries in Africa and MENA region. Next slide. Our Patients Alliance program, which is a coalition of diverse patient foundations. Currently, we have 57 patient advocacy groups spread over 4 continents. Next slide, please. Our Corporate Alliance program aims to collaborate with pharmaceutical companies involved in rare diseases research to ensure equitable and affordable access to therapies. Currently, we have 6 members in the Corporate Alliance program. Next slide. Our research programs, which includes our research core, a network of experts across different streams of medicine and research, and various grant-funded research programs and projects. You can see an overview of this here. Next slide. Our research work has resulted in several publications and peer-reviewed journals. Here is a glimpse of the latest ones. Next slide. We have a strong focus on engaging the community through education programs. Here you can see the latest in a webinar series focused on topics and interest to the rare community in US and India. ranging from lived experiences of patients and caregivers to informational sessions of newborn screening, research, and clinical trials. Next slide. These are the glimpses of the recent webinars which happened in the last quarter, and they are offered free and available on our YouTube channels. We will be sharing the links to you in a short time. Next slide. We are also participating at international forums to ensure that the rare voice and the perspective is heard at these events. As you can see, most of our activities are focused on cross-border collaborations, which we believe are crucial to bridge the divide between the East and the West in terms of availability in critical life-saving therapies for rare diseases. Next slide. Through all this, we ensure highest levels of transparency and have been recognized for our efforts with Guide Stars Platinum Seal of Transparency. And we have constantly been rated as a top-rated nonprofit. We are able to do all this through the power of collaborations and are grateful to our partners, our Patient Alliance and Corporate Alliance members. As you can see, we have completed 5 years in November this year, and this is a snapshot of our impact in numbers. Next slide. We'd also like you all to invite to our next upcoming webinar, which is on August 25th, this Sunday, coming Sunday, and our flagship event, that is Indo US Bridging Rare Summit of this year. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, our founder and executive chair of Indo US Rare, to provide an overview of our summit and to host the webinar.
Thank you so much, Ramya. It's my pleasure to invite all of you to this Indo US Rare webinar today on an exciting topic. But before that, let me take this opportunity to invite all of you to our flagship event, the Indo US Bridging Rare Summit, which is scheduled for November 16, 17, and 18, 3 days at the reputed Indian National Science Academy campus in New Delhi. We are very excited to bring various stakeholders from United States and India for rare disease and orphan drug development. And you'll meet a number of key speakers and advocates there. Next slide. As you can see, we are honored to welcome the Minister of State for Rural Development, Dr. Chandra Pemasani from the Indian Ministry, and as a chief guest inaugurating the summit, as well as keynote speakers from the International Rare Diseases Research Consortium, Dr. Dave Pierce and Dr. Peter Marks from the FDA CBER. And many other reputed speakers who will be at on various panels and sessions. So many more to come. Please look out and register. There are various ways in which you can participate. You could consider attending, registering, submit a speaker abstract. I think we have last few days that we are accepting abstracts. There may be opportunity for some late-breaking poster abstracts as well. You could consider sponsoring the summit, exhibiting at the summit, and raise visibility and get involved. As at the end of the summit, we are forming the US-India Strategic Blueprint Working Group that will involve in a breakout session on various topics, such as regulatory, clinical trials, commercialization, policy advocacy, and diagnosis and screening. So we can see how we can bring the forces together from US and Indian subcontinent to accelerate progress for rare diseases worldwide. Next slide. So with that, I'm super excited to welcome our collaborator and expert professional leader, Dr. Partha S. Mukherjee, for today's webinar presentation. Thank you, Dr. Partha Mukherjee, for accepting our invitation and making time to share your vast experience from 27 years of professional experience in the industry, in global biopharmaceutical organizations, including Pfizer, AstraZeneca, GSK, and the big pharma. And you have contributed to over 15 new drug applications, biologics licensing applications, ANDAs, and 21 global product launches. So Dr. Mukherjee has also led 110 early and late stage development projects and has authored 13 peer-reviewed publications and 42 presentations at national and international scientific conferences. Dr. Mukherjee is also an active member of USP Expert Committee, Bioforum, and scientific reviewer for World Health Organization. He is currently heading CMC analytical development at Amicus Therapeutics, which is a rare disease-focused company based here in northern New Jersey. So it's my pleasure and honor to have collaborated with Dr. Mukherjee in co-authoring a chapter in a Springer book that might come out later this year as well. So it's my, Dr. Mukherjee has also been serving on our advisory board and guiding us on the manufacturing side, especially given the recent Biosecure Act. So with that, I welcome today's speaker, Dr. Partha S. Mukherjee. Please take it away.
Okay. Thank you so much, Harsha. That was a very nice introduction. So thanks a lot for that. I'm really privileged to be part of the Indo US Rare organization and also do my best for contribution from my side towards its mission. So with that, let me start on my slides. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's coming through. Thank you.
Good. All right. Okay. So this particular topic, CMC, chemistry, manufacturing, and control, it's a topic which is of high importance in drug development, pharmaceutical drug development, and essentially it plays a pivotal role in discovering drugs, developing drugs through various, preclinical and clinical phases. And then it's also responsible for taking the final compound through the approval process for health authorities. And after the launch of the product, it's also responsible for maintaining all the changes that are required for the quality of the product. So I want to take you through the CMC high-level overview in the next 30 minutes or so. And so right now, let's see. Okay. Yeah. So what is CMC? So CMC stands for Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Control. Three components of CMC, and those are the pillars of drug development. On the chemistry side, you have product characterization, release of your final product, and stability testing of the final product. That's the chemistry. The manufacturing part deals with lots of components. You have the facilities, equipment, utilities, raw materials that are used for making the drug product. So throughout my presentation, I will refer to drug substance and drug product, right? Two topics. One is drug substance means it's also called active pharmaceutical ingredient or API. And that is what gets in the dosage form that the patient takes. So you take the capsule or tablet, that is the DP or drug product. However, the active ingredient is the drug substance. So the drug substance gets combined with excipients and that forms the drug product, right? So the manufacturing plays a huge role of that final drug product. And then the controls, there are a lot of controls that are put in place based on the regulatory requirements in terms of controlling the analytical test methods for your drug product and drug substance. The specifications, that means these are limits or ranges to which your drug substance or drug product needs to comply to be, quality fit. And then other things are there, batch records, training, etc. Typically, CMC starts when you have a lead compound, which is abbreviated as candidate or CAN, C-A-N. Once a lead compound is nominated from discovery phase of drug development, that's where the CMC starts to take over in terms of taking it through the different phases of drug development. And then through the approval process, then covering post-approval changes, which are inevitably, bound to happen for manufacturing and product quality maintenance. And this is an integral part of drug development, whether it's common therapeutic areas like cardiovascular, central nervous system, GI or gastrointestinal, pain and inflammation, oncology, and rare disease, which is relevant for this talk. So what the regulatory authorities look for is the product that has been developed are compliant in terms of identity. Is the patient taking the right drug? Safety, is it safe to take the patient, for the patient to take it at the dose prescribed by the physician? Quality, is it of the right quality or it has a lot of impurities in that drug product? Stability, how stable, that is the shelf life that is listed on the bottles that you get from pharmacy. It says use by certain date, and that's what CMC comes up with, that particular date which is written on your label. Purity, as I mentioned, and then the potency. Potency is more for biologics, which relates to how much of the active drug is present in your dosage form. That's the potency assay, okay? And all these needs to be captured in two areas. One is called Module 2 of Quality Overall Summary and Module 3 of Quality. And these are part of a submission process called Common Technical Document or CTD. And that applies to all drugs, whether you are dealing with small molecules or biologics. The submission dossier for the regulatory authorities that has to have those two components, QoS, which is the module 2, and the quality. Okay. So why we need CMC? So basically CMC is there to make sure that the patient is getting, as I mentioned, the drug which is prescribed on the online label. It is the same drug which went through the clinical trial. That means it has been validated by the clinical process, that it is meant for the safety and efficacy of the target population. What are the critical components? There are quite a few, and I have just listed the ones which are relevant. How the drug is made, where the drug is made, so the location, what are the materials used for making the drug, how did you control the process to ensure the product consistency and quality? What are the test methods that were used to make sure the product quality was not compromised? And as I mentioned, the shelf life, that's how long does the product maintain its quality after it's made? So those are the very high level critical elements of CMC. So this gives a very high level snapshot of the overall drug discovery process. I'm not going to go through the details, but you start with discovery of the target. So basically this is the target on which the drug has to work, right? To make sure the disease has been addressed or remediated. So that's the target discovery. According to that, then they do high throughput screening. Thousands of compounds gets screened from medicinal chemistry, and they try to fit in with your target, biological target, and you have the compounds which are being screened you come up with the lead identification, which shows the most, potential in terms of various biological assays and things like that. Once that is done, then comes the lead expansion. And these are the terms, by the way, which are described a little bit differently by different pharma companies. And but the basic principle is that you discover compounds based on the fit to the target, biological target, basically. And then you optimize that target. That's when you come up with the lead optimization. And that is also called candidate nomination, or that's where you come up with the CAN, C-A-N, CAN. Once that happens, usually all major pharmaceuticals, they will nominate a CAN and also a backup CAN. In case the CAN fails, they have a backup CAN for any therapeutic areas for any disease states that they are researching, investigating. So then once the CAN is nominated, then you go through preclinical phase, which is primarily on animals, in vitro and in vivo models, and then the clinical phase, which is in humans. There are the three different stages, which I have slightly, touched upon in the next slides. And then it goes through the approval, and then it goes to the market, basically, okay? So this is where it goes, to show where does the CMC fit in. So as you can see, there is the discovery phase, you have the preclinical animal testing, then you file the IND or investigational new drug application, which is the requirement for FDA. And that's where CMC starts to kick in. Then you have the clinical studies, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Once that is complete, typically the whole process is anywhere from 10 to 15 years, depending on whether you're working on a complex small molecule or biologics or gene therapy products. It's a huge time. And the investment of money anywhere runs from 1.3 billion to upwards of $5 billion for bringing a drug to the market. So it's a huge, huge investment. So you have the NDA, which is new drug application on the US side, and also the BLA, which is biologics license application. Once you do that, then the agencies, they will take some time, up to 10 months, to say, yep, your package is solid, we can approve that. Once that gets approved, then you start the phase 4, which means once the drug is in the market, then you still have to monitor for adverse reaction. So that's the post-marketing commitment, and then approval changes, etc., that needs to happen. I'm going to skip this slide. The CMC as an interface for clinical and commercial phase. So if you are slightly familiar with the drug development process, you will hear these terms: clinical batch, pilot batch, engineering batch, all kind of terminologies that are being used. So CMC is actually linking your clinical batch, which is used in phase 1 through phase 3, and then when the product is approved, to the commercial batches. All through CMC has a part. So just very quickly, the pilot batches are used for demonstrating that you have made a quality and stable product consistently. That gets filed in your submission to the regulatory authorities in the technical section, right? And then you have to scale up. Scale up means now, based on the number of patients, you have to scale up from the lab scale, which was like few grams of the drug synthesized, the compound synthesized rather. Then you went to the clinical batches, which was probably in the range of few kilograms, etc. And then pilot batch. Engineering batch is the another step where you're actually scaling up your manufacturing from pilot to commercial. Then you have to validate your commercial manufacturing process. That's where process validation comes into play. And then commercial batches, which are typically the huge scale for the final manufacturing, which will be probably several, thousands of kilograms of batches. So the commercial batch is typically at least 10 times the pilot batch scale. So other interesting thing of CMC is it is specific in terms of the product. So if you're looking at a tablet, the requirements could be different compared to when you're talking about injectables. So it is a dose specific thing. However, there are some common expectations from all the dosage forms. And those are, you have to come up with some specifications, you have to come up with critical quality attributes, which I will talk about, later on, of your dosage forms. You need to manufacture based on good manufacturing practice or GMP criteria, and then testing in terms of, in process, means while it's being manufactured, you have to have some control over the testing. That's the in process testing. When you're releasing the batch for use by patients, then you have to do the release testing. And also integral part is the stability testing. So everything, these are the common aspects despite some dosage form specific CMC requirements. So CMC also plays a big role in terms of ensuring or assuring the product quality. So as you can see on the left side, the batches with high variability could have the quality attribute varying. So quality attribute could be assay of the product, right? How much of the active ingredient is present in the capsule. If it's varying from one batch to the other, that means you don't have control over your product quality, and that's a problem with your manufacturing process. So CMC makes sure that you have very stringent control over your manufacturing requirements. So that's where we are, looking at batches with the variability, and batches with low variability obviously is preferred in this case. Changes are going to happen, and there could be changes in the raw material supplier, the manufacturing side, the process, the specifications which are controlling the quality of the material and the final drug product. But main thing is the product quality needs to be constant, or you're improving over the life cycle of your product. So that's where CMC plays a huge role. And then there are some examples here. For example, the analytical testing, which is called the quality control, right? So when you're releasing a batch in the market for patients, use, you have to have analytical methods which needs to be able to identify and confirm the strength and purity of your drug. Again, the critical quality attributes are a list of tests or that needs to be performed on the drug substance or the drug product to ensure the quality of your product. So it could be as simple as, when you're making a tablet, is there any residual solvent from the manufacturing process that got carried over your drug substance? That's a CQA. Dissolution, tablet or capsule, how soon they're getting dissolved in the GI medium, gastrointestinal tract. So that's a critical quality attribute. So there are list of CQAs for each products, which is an essential thing of CMC. Other examples are control of raw materials that is done by various pharmacopoeial procedures, by using the cGMP elements and things like that. And then on the manufacturing side, obviously, there are parameters which are called critical process parameters. So when you're setting up an equipment to manufacture a drug substance or drug product, there needs to be a specific range for the individual attributes. Like when you're setting up, let's say, tablet manufacturing, how much should be the force of your tablet compression to make it the final form that you take? So that has to have a range. Things like that. So those are called the proven acceptable range, and those are the critical process parameters, basically. Okay. So those actually evolves as you are going through the development phase. And then quality assurance is making sure they're releasing the final product compliant with the GMP and health authority requirements. And I'm just going through the slides. These slide materials will be available, later on. So GMP, as I mentioned, GMP. So what are the elements of GMP here? So obviously you're looking at manufacturing of CMC as the big part of GMP. And there are some guidelines from FDA which needs to be followed. These are not negotiable. These are mandatory when you're doing the GMP manufacturing of your final product or clinical trial materials or the commercial launch. So EMA is the counterpart of FDA. That's for European Medicinal Agency. They also have a GMP aspect, and we need to follow those as it's written in those guidelines. So GMP is covering the manufacturing, as I said, from materials, premises, equipment, even down to the folks who are actually working in the GMP facility. Their hygiene, personal hygiene is also, even down to that details, GMP controls all the aspects. So there is some overlap between CMC and the GMP. And essentially, the compliance part are making sure the quality of the final product is ensured and it's built in your drug product. So these are product specific and process understanding on the CMC side, and GMP part is making sure they are compliant with quality systems that the pharmaceutical industry has in place. Overall, operations, those are again compliant with the guidelines set by the health authorities of that country where the drug is getting manufactured and things like that. So they're not the same, but they have commonality. And if you see this slide, this actually showing the level of, this is the green basically line, which shows the level of GMP goes up as you are progressing through the drug development in your CMC space. So you start with R&D in the discovery, you apply GDP or good documentation practice. Then you have the GLP, which is the good laboratory practice that applies for animal studies. Then the actual GMP element starts when you are trying out the compound in clinical patients, basically, and human volunteers. So in discovery phase, CMC plays a big role in terms of making sure there are these three aspects: the molecule design intent, which means the chemical properties of the drug substance is what you're looking for in the final product. Then how well you can manufacture that. That's the manufacturability attribute of the molecule. And then this is a huge buzzword in industry now, potential genotoxic impurity, PGI. So the PGI, you have to make sure you have remediated those and there is no risk from nitrosamines and things like that in the CMC space. So these are all the pillars in the picture which are used for nominating a molecule from discovery. You have the PK, pharmacokinetics, the safety assessment, pharmacology, along with CMC, they do this, important aspect of candidate nomination. Once that happens, then you move to the preclinical development phase. That's where the GLP and animal studies, they start. And those needs to be compliant with FDA's 21 CFR Part 58. That's a very strict set of guidelines which are provided for ensuring these are done in the right, spirit. And again, CMC plays a big role. You have to make sure the drug substance are in right amount and also how you are making sure that they are compliant with the good laboratory practice or GLP. You have to determine the dose and administration route of the drug substance. That's the time you come up with the first prototype formulation, which will be administered in phase 1 to human volunteers. So it's a very, very important phase. And you do a lot of these DMPK, which is the distribution metabolism pharmacokinetics, basically drug metabolism pharmacokinetics. That becomes the part of IND enabling studies, basically starting with the phase 1 and so forth. So very important role of CMC in preclinical development. And then comes the actual drug development phase, which is phase 1 through phase 3. These are the IND, 3 different phases, investigational new drug. So you have to actually file the IND before you can start putting the drugs, these investigational drugs in human volunteers in phase 1. If you are familiar with the different phases of IND as part of clinical trials, phase 1, the main purpose of phase 1 is to ensure whatever you are administering, are they safe? That's one of the key goals. It's done in a very small number of patients. Phase 2 is saying that, does the drug work? So it's looking at more of the efficacy of the drug that you're administering. This is typically several hundred patients and gets more and more complicated. Then the phase 3 is a huge study, which is expanded study up to several thousand subjects. This is where you are making sure that this drug is different from the existing medications, existing treatment out there. So, and then a lot of the efficacy studies, a lot of the safety studies, targeted patient population, etc., gets studied during the phase 3. So, very briefly, each of these sections could be a seminar or talk by itself. But I just want to give you the highlight of that because that's the integral part of CMC. So if you look at CMC, how that fits in with the phase 1 through phase 3 IND filing, there are very specific requirements. I'm not going to go through the details, but for drug substance part and the drug product part, there are very specific requirements which are highlighted in the module 2 and module 3 of the common technical document. So example, brief description of the material, how you're making it. You need to put like a flow diagram. What are the analytical procedures used to support that, etc. And then for the drug product side, you have to say, what are the components of the capsule or tablet or whatever the dosage form? How are they manufactured? How, basically the flow diagram is also a key part again, which is suggested. Stability is an important aspect of that on both drug substance side and on the drug product side. So that's for IND phase 1. And then as you can see, based on the complexity of this slide, a huge list of needs from CMC side to make sure in the phase 2 and phase 3, you are providing the right CMC content in your dossier. So dossier means the final document which gets to the health authorities and they are reviewing and approving that document as applicable. So that's called the dossier. So phase 2 and phase 3, it gets more and more complex as you move from phase 1 through phase 3. Let's say, just as an example, in phase 1, you have to say how much is the total impurity present in your drug product. In phase 2, you have to say out of the total, what are the specified impurities that could be monitored by your analytical method. In the phase 3, the requirement is even further. It's now saying, what are your specified, identified impurities? What are the unspecified impurities? What are the unknown impurities and the total? So you can see how from total impurity in phase 1, it evolves to 4 different category of impurities when you're dealing with phase 3. So just an example how all the CMC elements are evolving and becoming more complex as you move in the clinical trial phase. Now it's getting to the rare disease space. CMC plays a big role as with any drug development. However, there are some challenges that happens in the rare disease space. One of the reason is when you're talking about the orphan drugs, the volume of the drug is really much less compared to any of the common therapeutic areas, right? Based on the limited number of patients. So that actually limits the number of batches that you are going to manufacture for that drug. And that can make it really challenging to build a history of the manufacturing, typically, which is leveraged to improve the process, because here you are limited by the number of batches over the lifetime of the product. So you can optimize, but it doesn't give that leverage to you. And then a lot of the gene therapy, oligonucleotide, and other proteins, etc., which are used in rare disease space, the manufacturing technology is highly specialized and can be novel. So that requires significant cost, time, and resource need from the sponsor of that rare disease. The other thing which becomes challenging is you are manufacturing only a limited amount of drug substance in the early stage. So maintaining the supply chain for the clinical trials could become a challenge, and that can impact the CMC strategy, because the thing is, there is not much leeway in terms of negotiation regarding the quality requirements, whether you're dealing with rare disease or a established therapeutic area drug, let's say blood pressure medication, right? So you still have to comply with the quality requirements, but you are having a limited amount of drug substance to deal with that. So that could become a challenge when you are dealing with rare disease CMC. Other thing is regulatory requirements are constantly evolving in the global market. So when you're talking about rare disease companies, these are typically small and mid-sized companies. Large companies typically try to stay away from rare disease just because there is not much incentive from financial perspective, let's be honest. Um, so in that case, the sponsor may not be aware of specific CMC requirements of a country where it's planning to launch the drug. And that can lead to some delay in leading that launch process and things like that. Then the same rare disease company, if they are working on several modalities like small molecule biologics, gene therapy, that could become a resource issue because they have the same set of subject matter experts, but they are working on all the different modalities. So that can become a challenge because now they have to hire consultants. They have to, look for hiring new resources, which could be kind of a financial strain on the CMC side for rare disease companies. And then the other thing is the drug product, which is the final form, that needs to be developed in a patient-centric dosage mode for rare disease, typically, because you are dealing with a lot of adults and children on most of the rare disease space. So how you can tailor the drug product dosage form to fit both your pediatric population and the adult population, you have to have a very good strategy for the CMC to do that. The cost recovery, as I mentioned, is a challenge because you are only manufacturing a limited number of products, and that can be a challenge. So there are a lot of roadblocks that happen in that case. And in some cases for rare disease, there could be competition also because a lot of companies, they try to focus on the popular rare disease spaces like lysosomal storage disorder or LSD. So that can challenge the 7-year exclusivity that you get with the orphan drugs. If the other company shows they are superior, then you are in trouble, that they will probably, break in your exclusivity period. And then manufacturing facilities, small rare disease companies, they don't have that. So that becomes a CMC challenge. And that can lead to finding the right CDMO and doing the research on that. They have to ensure that there is the little bit, consistency in batch to batch manufacturing, which becomes a challenge when you're talking about gene therapy, which has a lot of variability in manufacturing. So a lot of things that rare disease, specifically those companies, they have to keep in mind from CMC space. And the final few ones are here. The regulatory delay, as I mentioned, that could be a challenge to the rare disease drugs from CMC perspective, because just, the requirements are quite diverse in that case. And I think those are the key points. There are a huge list of challenges on CMC space, some of those which I've captured here. For pediatric side, just to touch on that, on the CMC, you have some specific things, palatability, that how acceptable it is to the pediatric population. That gets a lot of attention, and you have to spend a lot of time and resource on the CMC side to develop a pediatric rare disease, drug. So that's a big thing. And then other things like the geographical and socioeconomic difference that can also impact on what kind of test agent you are putting in your drugs and things like that. So overall, on the pediatric side, it makes it even more complex for finding the right dose, the right palatable dose, the dose frequency, and things like that for the CMC aspect. So CDMOs, ideally rare disease drugs companies, they have to rely on the CMC expertise of a contract manufacturing organization, because that's like a one-stop shop for CMC. They will do the manufacturing, they will characterize your drug product. They can even work with the sponsor to make sure there is the good, robust drug submission package prepared. So a lot of interaction happens, and choosing the right CDMO becomes a very critical aspect in that way. Then the other aspect is when you are in licensing rare disease drugs, in many cases, you have to make sure the CMC package is very robust, because many times the rare disease companies, they don't have the financial power to do the discovery phase, right? So they are getting a molecule or compound which is already halfway through the process, means it has been in the early stage of development. That's where you are bringing in that compound, but you have to make sure all the CMC aspects are checked, basically, in terms of due diligence. So that's a very important in terms of the technical, regulatory compliance, etc., for the compound. Touching upon very quickly on the artificial intelligence, which is again a buzzword in CMC. It's like data accuracy, improved analytical methods. The production can be AI driven. There are a lot of things in the supply chain, and you can see there are 18 different categories where formulation optimization, etc., manufacturing waste, where AI can play a huge role in CMC. So all the big pharma, they have already started to look in how they can deploy all these several aspects of artificial intelligence in CMC. I'm going to skip the in silico CMC because this is more on how you can use software-based CMC for drug development in the discovery phase and things like that. And then this requires a very strong cross collaboration. The core team, as you can see, they are interacting on CMC side with the development, characterization, drug substance synthesis, pharmaceutical development, regulatory part, the clinical supplies, the toxicologists. It's a huge, multifaceted, cross-functional team which CMC has to deal with. So it's a very complex part of your drug development. And then just want to touch upon the consequences that can happen if there you have CMC deficiency in product development. It can be as simple as a request for information from FDA, let's say. And then it can get as complex as criminal prosecution and fines. So evolving from 483 to warning letters, seizures, or injunctions and things like that, the implication is tremendous for a company. It can shut down a company production, basically. So the key take-home message is take CMC part very seriously for drug development, because it can be very simple process all the way to having like millions or billions of dollars of fine for the pharmaceutical company, which is not following elements of GMP when you're manufacturing the CMC, the drug product basically. And then just to conclude, so CMC is an integral part of the whole process, and it applies from discovery all the way to post-approval. There are some regulatory bodies, very strict requirements for CMC. In the rare disease space, there are some very specific challenges on the CMC, and AI and in silico tools are getting more and more prominence in CMC, pharmaceutical development, delivery, and in the industry in general. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Again, each segment could be a standalone seminar because it's such a huge, session, and that's it. So I took up a little bit more than I anticipated, but I get in the flow, and essentially there are a lot of things there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukherjee. That was spot on, and you finished on time. So thank you for such a very informative and insightful presentation covering your vast experience and covering such complex and comprehensive information in a very short period of time. That's extremely helpful. I learned a lot just listening to this. And I have a few questions for discussion, and as more questions trickle in from our listeners today, there is Dr. Sharda Yadav, a former NIH scientist, who is asking if you could elaborate a little bit on backup CAM in one of the slides you mentioned about.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is we do a scoring criteria based on the three categories, which is the molecule design intent, which is purely physical chemical property of your drug substance. The manufacturability attribute also has several subcategories of that, which means how amenable is your molecule to be manufactured and scaled for commercial scale. How many steps are it's taking? So less than 5 steps is the ideal. If you have more than 5 steps in the synthesis, that's probably doable, but not desirable. So that's the MD manufacturability attribute. And then the PGI means, do you have any potential structural feature of nitrosamines, which is a huge topic these days for its, carcinogenic and teratogenic effects, basically mutagenic also. So essentially, those three criteria are being scored for all of the compound panels. And then whatever is the highest score that is nominated as your lead candidate, whatever is the next score in that ranking, that becomes your backup candidate. And it's always required to have a backup candidate, because if for some reason your can fails in phase 1, you have already a backup candidate which can move in parallel. So I hope that helps to give the justification.
Great. Thank you so much. I have many questions. Let's see how many we can cover in the remaining 6 minutes. I'm curious how a lot of these processes presumably were probably developed for small molecule based chemistry. How does this change for antisense oligonucleotides or cell and gene therapies and other recent modalities for rare diseases?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So all of these modalities, they have very different manufacturing process. So the basics are, you still have to follow critical quality attributes. You have to have critical process parameters during manufacturing. You have to have a set of specifications for your drug substance and drug product. But the manufacturing differs widely based on what you're looking at. Small molecules is completely chemistry-based synthetic process. When you're going to the biologics, obviously that's based on biological, synthesis and proteins and peptides and all kind of things are there. And then gene therapy, cell and gene therapy is even one level higher in terms of complexity for manufacturing, because Here, the product is coming either from the patient directly or from a pool of patients like autologous and allogenic, those kind of things. So there is commonality in terms of a regulatory expectation for these different modalities, but the actual manufacturing varies quite a lot when you're moving. So, for example, oligonucleotide that sits in between small molecule and biologics in terms of its feature.
Yeah.
Peptides, they sit between small molecules and biologics in terms of their, requirements.
Yeah.
So it's a wide topic. Each of the modalities we can go on talking for hours,
Yeah.
basically.
Right. So very interesting and complex. One thing that we cannot ignore in the CMC and manufacturing side, as of now in the United States, is the Biosecure Act that was recently introduced as a bill. If you can please explain what Biosecure Act is and how is it affecting manufacturing and in general, but rare diseases in particular.
Yeah, so Biosecure Act is a very important topic which has come up on recent times, and essentially based on some information whether the patient data was compromised, there is a act that came out, that's the Biosecure Act, and essentially what we're looking for is to move out some of the manufacturing and activities from China. That's where the Biosecure Act is related to. There are a couple of companies which are affected by that. So WuXi AppTec and WuXi Biologics, those are in the scope for Biosecure Act. And a lot of the manufacturing companies in US, they actually rely heavily on China because of the cost, and the skill set is there. So the infrastructure is there. However, they have been given time till January 1st, I believe, 2032 to back out from China. So that's the premise of Biosecure Act. Now, the implications are tremendous. It can open up a lot of avenues for the neighboring country, India, for example, to get on those business which is coming out or transitioning out from China if we have the right infrastructure. The talent pool is there in India, for example. It just requires the right infrastructure so that some of those things can be moved, if applicable, to the drug manufacturing on the API side and the drug product side to India. And there could be other companies which will come in the scope of Biosecure Act, and that's why there are a lot of hesitancy to invest brand new projects, brand new manufacturing in China's organizations. And they're looking at other things to keep it local within US or in EU. The compromises in terms of the cost, of course, the cost goes skyrocketing for the same batch manufacturing in China versus US or EU.
Yeah.
But that's the compromise we have to deal with. As long as the quality is not compromised, and there could be alternate, less, costly countries available or resources like in India. I keep coming back to India because there is huge potential on that to leverage from the Biosecure Act.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. That's very interesting and an opportunity for India. I've heard in the recent months, the top leadership of the FDA has been encouraging the industry to move to India for cost advantage and others. So it's in the context of Indo US Organization for Rare Diseases, it's a interesting opportunity and topic for how we can include manufacturing as a key part of collaborations between US and India. There is one question around how CMC principles may apply or differ when it comes to complementary and alternative medicine, especially molecules from natural products from plants or mineral origin.
Yeah, so the basic things of CMC will still apply when you're talking about natural, products from natural origin. The CMC elements will be still applicable in terms of coming up with the specification, making sure if that is meant for going to the patients and it's not an OTC, although OTC also requires GMP manufacturing. but you still have to make sure the elements of GMP as relevant for the country of manufacturing, those still apply. You still have to come up with the set of quality criteria in terms of specifications, which the compound has to adhere in terms of, assay or impurity or whatever the case may be, dissolution, etc. So the basic premise is still the same, that whether it's natural or chemical synthesized or biological or gene therapy, again, it's the set of chemistry and manufacturing specification, the control strategy you have to demonstrate before it can be approved for the, as a drug of interest.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nagashayan Anatesh, for that question. He's an Ayurvedic expert from Bangalore. One last question, if we can cover this question from Dr. Shweta Sharma on is CMC regulated or supervised by FDA, or are there other regulatory bodies also involved here?
Yeah, CMC basically, when the drug is getting approved in US, so it has to go through FDA essentially. Now there are a lot of guidance out there which we need to comply to make sure it's a robust package going to FDA. For example, in the CMC space, we have all the pharmacopoeial requirements, right? USP, United States Pharmacopoeia. There are the GMP guidelines from FDA that we have to follow. 21 CFR 211. We have to follow ICH guidelines in the CMC, which is the International Conference on Harmonization, Committee on Harmonization. So yes, so all these guidelines play a part to produce the robust package which gets approved, reviewed and approved by FDA. And unfortunately or fortunately, that's the best way to control the quality of medicines in any country, whether it's FDA here or EMA in Europe and things like that.
Yeah. It's very necessary and critical, and so glad to know that the drugs that we all depend upon are going through such stringent GMP manufacturing and quality conscious process that ensures we are consuming medicines and not the impurities as well.
Right. We are consuming the right medicine and not consuming tons of junk impurities along with
Right,
it.
right.
Uh,
So
And it's
thank you
supposed to
again.
work. It's supposed to work. Efficacy. That's what we
Absolutely.
are trying to ensure.
So I think we are a little over time. So thank you all for joining today. I know many more online and on social media. So this recording will be made available to everyone on a long-term basis. So appreciate, please join me in thanking Dr. Partha Mukherjee for sharing wonderful insights today, and look forward to seeing you all on the next webinar and at our Indo US Bridging Rare Summit in November.
Thank you so much. Thanks all for joining, and hope I could give a quick overview of what CMC stands for.
Yeah. Look forward to having you again, Dr. Mukherjee, for a more detailed coverage of other interesting topics on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Harsha, and thanks Indo US Rare for this opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.